Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today our special guest is one of the most respected, admired, and beloved women in the history of broadcast journalism. She co-hosted Good Morning America for 17 years, making her the longest-running female host ever on early morning television and earning 5 Emmy nominations. She currently hosts the PBS television series Second Opinion and the Washington Post podcast series Caring for Tomorrow. After being diagnosed with breast cancer in 2014, she mobilized herself into a powerful advocate for breast cancer awareness, healthy living, good health care, and senior care. She has served as national spokesperson for numerous charities, including the American Heart Association, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and the American Red Cross. And if that weren't enough, she's written 12 best-selling books. Through her public speaking, media appearances, social media platforms, and philanthropy, she's one of America's most recognized, acclaimed, and trusted personalities. She's the one and only Joan Lunden. Joan, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks. I love being here.
Joan, you started out in broadcasting in 1973 as a news anchor and correspondent in Sacramento, and eventually worked your way up at ABC to feature news reporter and then co-host of Good Morning America. You rose up the ranks in media at a time when women were not being taken seriously as journalists. I see you as a real pioneer, and it's such an honor to celebrate your amazing career on our show.
Oh, thanks. It's been an amazing life. And little did I realize, back in 1973 that it would become what it was, that I would ever, become a national host of a TV show. I mean, little did I realize in 1980 when I became the host of Good Morning America that I would be there for the next almost 20 years.
Did you have any female role models or mentors to guide you?
Well, there really weren't any role models. There's Barbara Walters. She was on the Today Show. But I mean, beyond that, there weren't. You can maybe count them on one hand. When I started in Sacramento, I called the station and I got the news director on the phone. And I, managed to get an interview with him. And I, went in with my little list of questions, what are the possibilities for women in this changing field of broadcasting. And after about 5 minutes, he said, well, clearly you know how to write an interview. And he took me into the studio and he auditioned me. And he was so ingratiating and really said, I think you could have real potential. But bottom line is there was no job available. But the weatherman for the station, who was like this character, a larger than life character, he saw the whole thing. And he followed me out into the parking lot and he said, and he made me an offer that changed my life forever. He said, there are a few stations around the country that are putting weather girls on. And I would like to make you Sacramento's first weather girl. That was my hometown. And I have to admit, I thought, the weather? Like, I don't know anything about the weather. I don't care about the weather. How boring. I wouldn't have answered that newspaper ad if I had seen it. But somehow I had enough sense to hear an opportunity and act on it. So I said, sure. So I started working for him. I would run and get all the wire copy of what's happening in the weather in different places. And after about 6 months, he said, I would like to put her on the air. And the guys at the top said, no. I said, we're not ready for that. The next day he called in sick and called me and said, you're on today. So I went in and I was on. And, that means I started, the weather's always at the end of the show. And sometimes you might have 2 minutes and sometimes you might have 5 minutes. It all depends on how the show goes. And there's no script. There you have it in your head what you're going to do. But first of all, there was, the teleprompters really weren't even used at that point. So you would just look down at the copy and you'd look back up at the camera. I went on. Of course, I don't even remember it. It was in a daze. And I remember the anchor used to say, Joni, you're like one of those little wind up dolls that you wind up too much. So your voice goes really high. You talk really fast. He said, every time you're going to go on, just think low and slow. Take a big deep breath, low and slow. And that I carried that thought with me from local TV to network TV to always like take that until finally, of course, you become so at ease on television. You don't have to do the low and slow, but people can use that tip when they're walking into, like, give a presentation at a PTA meeting or a business meeting, low and slow, because otherwise your vocal cords, they tighten up and it makes your voice go up. You know, women just weren't being hired. And I rose to the ranks consequently very quickly.
So if you could go back and talk to that young Joan Lunden who was just starting out in the industry, what would you have said to her besides low and slow?
You know, my husband always says that if you took a page out of the Joan Lunden playbook, it would be, whenever anyone asks you if you can do something, just say yes, and then go figure out how to do it. And that's basically what I did back then before it became like the motto I live by. You know, people always say, my God, you've flown in F-18s and land on aircraft carriers, and you've done all these things. Like, it's amazing. I said, I know, because every time somebody asked me if I wanted to do something, I just said yes.
It's great advice.
Yeah, you got to be open to opportunities and you have to act on them.
Your first co-host on Good Morning America was David Hartman. The first two women who worked with him, Nancy Dussault and Sandy Hill, in my opinion, were treated more like sidekicks than co-hosts. You were really the first woman on the show to be a true co-anchor. Was it difficult to convince the network to give you equal billing, as it were?
As a matter of fact, they didn't give me equal billing. I'm glad that that's how you saw it. But I remember when they did my bio, my ABC bio, and I got it to proofread it. And it said, Joan Lunden, in-studio interviewer.
Oh.
And I went back and I said, why doesn't it say co-host? And they said, because it's in David Hartman's contract that nobody can be called co-host. Remember, in all fairness, David came out of Hollywood. He was the star of Lucas Tanner, one of the highest rated shows. He was an educator. He was a star in, I forget what medical show, where he was a doctor. Like, he had garnered really high ratings, and he'd always had played these authoritative characters. So the head of entertainment, because that show was put on by ABC Entertainment, not ABC News. And ABC News always was really bugged about it, that ABC Entertainment figured it out to put together a show to go against the Today Show. Right. And so they brought in David Hartman. And again, the news department was like, what? You're bringing in a Hollywood actor to be, and you know what? He was this, and I'm not going to say necessarily was, maybe he was playing it, but whatever. But he was this friendly, authoritative, but slightly kind of almost like a character playing himself. But he was, and they built a home. They didn't build a big blue and gray set with a big, world behind us. It was a house. We had a kitchen and a living room. We brought our home into your home. We had Marvin Hamlish do the music. You might remember, da 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 da. It was like a gentle welcome into the day. And then we did the news off the top of the show. We threw to Washington, Steve Bell, you may remember him. He did the news. And then we had on interviews, and we had kind of stories about the news of the day, the story behind the story, helping you understand the story. And we had reporters, but we didn't call them reporters. We called them family members, because it was that we brought a whole new kind of essence of what morning TV should be. And we didn't feel they should be anonymous faces like on the evening news that just came on from so-and-so, here's the story, and they were gone. And people became, they became friends. Everybody knew Dr. Tim Johnson was our doctor. And the formula worked. I mean, we shot up to #1 and stayed there for 17 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, starting in February 1987, Charlie Gibson was your co-host, and that was truly a marriage made in heaven. Your popularity skyrocketed. You consistently beat the Today Show in the ratings for many years. What do you think it was about the chemistry between you and Charlie that just captivated all of us so much?
Charlie didn't say she can't be called co-host. Charlie, as a matter of fact, knew what happened. And what happened is that, as sometimes happens, people get a little too big for their britches. And David wanted the show to be called Good Morning America with David Hartman. And he wanted his production company to own the show. And ABC just wasn't going to do that. So they looked for a new co-host. I was a huge cheerleader for Charlie Gibson. He was a Capitol Hill correspondent. And he was on every now and then, and he had sat in for Charlie a couple times. And as opposed to playing that kind of like every man's man that I think David always played, Charlie was every man's man. He was this kind of, he'd make fun of himself. He didn't take himself too seriously, but at the same time, he's brilliant. I mean, he really is smart.
And highly credible.
Highly credible. I remember the first day he was on the show, we'd gone out to dinner the night before with his dad. And I said, what was he like as a kid? He said he was reading the Congressional Record when he was 9. I was like, could have guessed that one. But, he came into my office right before we debuted him on the air. He came in to move his stuff into his office. And he came into my office and he closed the door behind him. And he said, I know that you have really pushed and really cheerleaded for me to get this job. I know that. And I know you had a lot to do with it because you've held the ratings while David's gone and you got a lot of stock right now. And I'm grateful for that. And I wanted to say to you, let's be equals. Let's do this 50-50. Let's never fight each other for a story or one-up each other. Let's show America how a man and a woman can work as equals. And I said, I will take that deal. And he always lived up to it. And we were kind of like brother, sister, in that if I noticed in the morning that he had in the dark put on one brown sock and one blue sock, I pointed it at the second we went on camera. And people loved that.
Yes.
And we were just really, truly great friends. He used to say that we were like an old married couple. We could finish each other's sentences, but we just didn't have sex.
Well, you weren't just good friends. You became friends of the audience. And the thing that always amazed me, I've heard it said many times that the morning slot on television is the most difficult, and you did it for almost 2 decades. You must have made a lot of sacrifices in your personal life to maintain that kind of schedule.
I look back on it now, quite honestly, Harvey, and say, how did I have 3 kids while doing a show where I had to get up Monday through Friday at 3:30 in the morning? Like, is that possible? Oh yeah, that's right. I did it. I mean, it's a grueling schedule, which is why some people just, can't really deal with it. But it's one of the most amazing seats from which to view the world.
Well, it's funny you should say that.
Everyone.
I'm glad you just said that because, Joan, you've interviewed Presidents Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush Sr. and Jr., and Clinton and their wives. Were you satisfied with the freedom you were given to ask the questions that you felt needed to be asked?
Yeah, nobody ever stopped me from asking a question, ever. Every evening, this was before we didn't have laptops. We didn't have iPhones. We didn't have Google. We would just have a guy would come to our house, the messenger at night with reams of paper, and we would read through all this research. And half the time you got in the next morning and something happened somewhere in the world and you weren't interviewing any of those people. Like all of a sudden you had like all these new people you were interviewing. But they would also call us in the late afternoon, the writers. And the writers pre-interviewed the guests. But I used to say, I don't care so much about the questions that you're going to tell me I should ask. I can read the interview that the messenger just brought. Tell me the questions I shouldn't ask. Which of the questions are going to take me down a rabbit hole and And is this person going to go on for 3 minutes when I have 4 minutes and 10 seconds for the interview? So sometimes knowing what not to ask, because the person couldn't sum it up because they're not professional TV people. And our job was to make them feel comfortable enough, which was sometimes hard if they were on it. I remember one morning we had someone on at like 7:15, and a doctor, I thought it was a female doctor, and she'd had like 5 cups of coffee probably. And I remember David was interviewing her, and David all of a sudden looked at her and said, "Are you okay?" At which point she fainted.
Oh.
Now, the bad part of that is that you have to go to commercial. He says, "We'll be back." But right after that segment is that 7:25 to 7:30 local news that happens everywhere. So nobody got to find out what happened until the opening of the next half hour. And she was this, sometimes I remember interviewing people that were so smart and leaders in their industry, but they would get so nervous that I would be able to tell right away in the very first question, I'm going to have to give this person the answer to the question in the question.
Wow.
And you'd have to just, the whole idea was to try to take them by the hand and help them tell the story and get from the beginning to the middle to the end. And part of that was just eye contact and body language that, like, I gotcha, I gotcha. We can tell the story of yours.
You showed enormous heart to be able to do that, I've got to say. And I wondered, when you did interview presidents and other politicians, was it difficult for you to keep your own personal political views out of the picture?
Never, because the world wasn't like it is today. David and I, and Charlie and I, made a concerted effort never to reveal our political affiliation, our religious affiliation. Our goal back in those days, like I remember interviewing Jerry Garcia and Tipper Gore, and the interview was about parental labeling on records. And Tipper Gore was Vice President Gore's wife, who was leading this charge. And of course, Jerry Garcia, they didn't want to have parental guidance on the front of their albums. Our goal was at the end of that interview, you would not know which side of the interview I was on. I remember interviewing Eleanor Schmiel, who was the head of NOW, and Phyllis Schlafly, who leads, I forget what it's called, but it's basically against NOW. And I got all this mail that said, I can tell that you were with Eleanor Schmiel and Phyllis Schlafly. And remember, we got boxes and boxes and boxes of mail every day, because that's the only way you can contact each other. And everyone would have looked at it through their own lens and just sure that you were on one side. Whereas we were making this amazing effort never to let you know which side of the fence that we were on.
It shows you that the perception that the public has, that the individual person has, is very much a creation of what their preconceptions are about you that have nothing to do with what they're really seeing.
Yeah. But we were not opinionated. I'll tell you, when Kate and Prince William were getting married, I got a call from one of the heads of Fox News. And he's the guy who had hired me at Good Morning America and had been a huge mentor of mine. And he said, I'm calling to make you an offer that I hope you'll say yes to. I'm over here at Fox News. I walked into the newsroom today and I realized that I don't think there's anybody here over 30. He says, they're all, and he said, I need somebody to cover this wedding for us that has some perspective. And you covered Diana's wedding, you covered Fergie's wedding. I need you. And I said, no. He said, just for a few weeks, will you just come and do some, Diana versus Kate and how they are? So I agreed. I went over and I worked for like 2 or 3 weeks just as a special royal correspondent. And I remember I walked into his office And he said, here's the key to your office and here's the bathroom key. I'd like you on the air at about 6:07. And remember, have an opinion. I was like, what? No researchers, no writers, no producers. They were tapping into my knowledge of all these previous weddings, but the whole importance was have an opinion. I was like, wow, has broadcasting changed?
Oh, has it ever?
I went into my office and I opened up my laptop and I started going to some of what was in my documents from long ago, but I really tapped in to the British press. I said, I don't want to know what anyone is saying about this here in America. Let me find out what they're saying over there. And I, you just had to kind of like throw it together. And then I went over to England and did spots from over there, but I was on my own.
And I watched it and I thought you were brilliant. And I don't even remember what your opinions were, but I thought that having the perspective of the other two royal weddings that you'd covered gave you some gravitas. But I want to ask you, I was very interested when you used to interview politicians because you were so neutral. Did you ever consider running for public office, given your immense popularity, your huge likability?
I mean, I have to be honest, I have had those thoughts throughout the years. Actually, when I was still in Sacramento, California, anchoring and reporting, I covered a lot of consumer things. I was a consumer reporter out there too. And I realized that consumers were really not being protected, that there was all this lobbying going on by industry. And I got it in my head that California consumers should be better protected. And I called my mom. I said, come and have lunch with me. And I said to her, I'm going to run for, to be in the state legislature here in California. She's like, what are you, crazy? You're on television. You're a big star. What do you want to do that for? I was like, because I think I can make my mark for my life better in that position. Well, everything that unraveled in like a week's time, because in a week's time, I was on a plane back to New York and getting hired by ABC. So never had that never came to fruition, but I have thought about it. Not recently.
No,
by the way, not recently, but I have had that thought over the years. But you can make a tremendous impact being on the air and interpreting science and stories for the public. And ever since I left GMA, I mean, my heart and soul was disseminating health information. And so I've kind of followed that path. But I always felt I was actually really good at interviewing politicians. You get more with honey than you do with vinegar, my mom always used to tell me. And I would go, and so often journalists will go in and they'll come at a senator or a congressman. And I would take the tact of, I've been reading over your bill. Like, how did you come up with this? Like, what did you learn along the way that let you write this kind of a bill? And then they went, blah, 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 blah. They would tell you everything.
Well, you had a non-confrontational style that was based on research. You knew what you were talking about, but you gave them a comfort level because you were not attacking them. I thought it was brilliant. And you got to remember, when I look back over your career doing my research, you reported from 26 countries. You covered 5 Olympic Games, 2 royal weddings, many major historical events. And as you mentioned, you covered the wedding of Prince Charles and Princess Diana. You were one of only 3 American journalists to interview Prince Charles in 1983 when he came to the US. What was your impression of him?
Each network got to send somebody. At the time, Diane Sawyer was the anchor at CBS This Morning. So she was there, and Jane Pauley and me. And we were taken into all the royal advisors, people, and we were told, given the rules, you can't extend your hand before he extends his. You can't sit before he sits. I mean, when you came out of there, it was like, whoa, what am I doing? And then they had us draw straws to decide who goes first. And Diane Sawyer got the straw. She went first. And 4 questions. Oh, and we were also told you can't ask any question about Koo Stark. So everybody here of this age category probably remembers that Koo Stark was this striptease dancer that was it Andrew that was going out with him?
I think so.
Yeah. And so it was like a big scandal over there, and you cannot ask a question about this. Well, Diane did. And and the interview went, like he wasn't saying, he just like clammed up. And Jane went next. I actually was last. And my producer, I was pregnant at the time, like maybe, I don't know, 7 months pregnant. So was Diana. So, she says, I dare you to walk out there with your shoes off, because he had made this remark one time, keep him barefoot and pregnant or something. I said, I'm not going to do that. But I did, right? I had the advantage that, here I was pregnant. I asked all the questions I was supposed to. Why are you here? It's because Lord Mountbatten, who was when his dad barely spoke to him and ruled with a heavy hand, Lord Mountbatten was always there, kind of like to have his back. And he really loved him. And he had started this school in the United States, and he was there for the opening of it. But that gave me the opening to say, well, it's interesting because you went to school in private schools, resident private schools, living away from your family. And you've spoken over time about how that was very difficult for you. So now are you going to do things differently with your children? We were never supposed to mention Diana or the baby. So, how does that sit with you now as a parent? How do you want to do things differently, now that you're a parent, or do you think that it should still be done the same way because of tradition? It is your child. And he answered, and he talked about it, and never with gregarious. There was nothing gregarious and warm and engaging and friendly. He was very British, stoic, and kind of talked in that manner. But he did talk. And then I was able to follow that up with, and how is your son and your wife? Because they had the first baby. This was having the second one. And he was able, and I was the last one. It was the last question. And he gave me an answer. And once again, I walked him down this path that he was comfortable with, so that we actually got to the end that we weren't supposed to go to. But we got there because we did it comfortably.
Yeah. And you presented yourself as very supportive. I remember that interview. And that's why I wanted to know what your impression of him was. When you look back at all of the people you interviewed, did any of your guests ever really surprise you?
Burt Reynolds.
Did he?
I never saw any of those, Something in the Bandit, whatever his movies were. I wasn't someone who ever went, that was kind of a guy movie. And I had only seen him a few times on The Tonight Show, where
he was hilarious.
Where he was always this like, hi, you're being honored with Mr. Sex here, and this cocky kind of a
swagger.
I expected that guy because that's the only thing I knew. And I went down to his home in Florida to interview him. And he was this incredibly thoughtful, smart guy who was very engaging and endearing and polite. No, I'm like Mr. Sexpot swagger at all. Just the nicest guy. I mean, sometimes you would find that. I remember Mary Tyler Moore. Mary Tyler Moore was my idol. Oh my gosh, I watched, her on the first show, and then where she was a reporter. And I just was always enamored with her. So now I've got an interview with her. And she walked in the studio. I saw her walk in the back door of the studio and walk down, and she was kind of stayed in the shadow. So I walked down to the living room set, and she walks over and says, I'm so nervous. I watch you guys every morning. I'm such a fan, and I'm so nervous to be on. I was like, am I hearing what I'm hearing?
That is a surprise. I would never have thought that.
Me either. And I was like, oh, come on. You're Mary Tyler Moore. Come on, sit, let's talk, But,
are there any people you didn't get to interview that you wish you could have?
Princess Diana.
Yes.
We never got that opportunity. And Jackie Kennedy, I did cover an opening of an art gallery, and I was there like a foot away from her as she was making her comments, but never that actual interview. Those are only the two that I can think of. Pretty much everybody else I interviewed.
Yeah, you've just mentioned two people that I think would have resonated with you so much because you're very empathetic as an interviewer. I've always wanted to be a talk show host, and you were one of my role models because of your empathy. The intelligence combined with the empathy, it came right out of the screen. I hope you know that, how very much admired you were and are.
That's so nice of you to say. I got to tell you, when I left Good Morning America, it wasn't the show that I was so, that I was going to miss so incredibly. It was the viewers, because I couldn't take them with me. We didn't have social media yet. And I just felt like all these people who had been my morning friends, who had been with me every morning, who had written to me over the years and sent me baby gifts when I had babies, and I was just cut off from them. And
well, not really. We followed you.
Well, when the day finally came that social media came about, and I went on to Facebook for the first time, I was like, all these people started coming. I was like, oh my God. And my husband said, you can't answer all of them. But you know what? I do answer almost all of them. Like, I go through that every day, and I don't know them personally, but they're kind of like that. They're kind of like this interesting extended family.
Well, I think you always need to remember that through you, we, the public, experienced many, many important events and got to know notable individuals through your eyes. You were our voice. I'll give you an example. In 1995, something that touched me very much. You and Peter Jennings co-hosted an ABC special covering the 50th anniversary of D-Day. That was an amazing program. Do you have any memories you can share with us about Peter Jennings?
Oh, yes. Peter is another guy who was unbelievably intelligent. He actually had a photographic memory. So he could give details about cities and things that happened in history, really like nobody else could. And I think he kind of questioned it when they said, we're going to have Joan Lunden from Good Morning America co-host with you. Because remember, we were that kind of stepchild of that the news just couldn't figure out why we had such good ratings. So I remember I got over there, and I'm a homework junkie. I'm like homework queen. I never want to go into any interview if I don't really understand it and know about it. Because if you go in that way, you'll never make a mistake. You'll never be caught not knowing something. I mean, that's just.
And you won't be as nervous.
And you won't be as nervous because you'll know that you have this bunch of information in your head.
So you know that I've researched your life inside and out.
I can tell. Yes. Thank you. And I watched so many videos. So I read so much. Like, I really knew what went on D-Day.
And boy, did it show.
And when we got over there, he took me I remember he came up to me and said, if there's anything you want to know about D-Day or, the war, just come to me because I know everything, which was kind of did he just say that? But he actually did. So then we did a rehearsal, and I had a female producer over there with me. And when we started this rehearsal, Peter asked me so many questions because he was trying to find out if I really knew anything. And my producer was furious. Like, he's trying to trip her up.
Really?
But he kind of was, but I guess he wanted to make sure that he had his partner, like, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, that I knew enough to have this role. And I did know because I had gone crazy berserk researching this in order to be ready, because I knew I was doing it with Peter Jennings. I was not about to go into it without a lot of ammunition.
But you see, what that tells me is that he didn't do his homework, because if he had, he would have already known what you're like. And would he have done that to a man?
I don't think he would have done it to a man ever. It would never have happened. And that was my producer's contention. It was because I was this blonde, how could I possibly know a lot about the war or D-Day? So, but it turned out that you watched it, the coverage was great. I remember I did a spot for Good Morning America, and I was walking on the beach. I still have the video. I was walking on the beach, and I said, I just wish everybody could have this experience where you walk this beach and you just imagine tens of thousands of young men who saw that we desperately needed people to defend freedom and democracy coming in on those boats and coming up, and they were being shot at and they didn't know what to do. Do they get on the beach? Do they go back? They couldn't go back. And seeing people right and left dying, I said, to be here and to walk this and to have that in my head, it makes me understand how precious democracy and freedom is, and how important we should all understand our lives to be in America, and how fortunate we are that we had all of these people who died in order for us to live the lives that we live, because we live a better standard of living, in my opinion, than any other country in the world, because I've been in so many other countries, and I don't think anybody has the kind of lifestyle that we have. And that was that emotion. And I remember it was kind of looked at that I was maybe a little too emotional, but people really responded to it, because it was just the more authentic I think you can be, and to speak your authentic truth, the more you connect with everybody out there. It's the same with my books.
Oh,
when I write books, I try to be as candid and sharing of my own experiences, to the point that my husband says, you can't say that, you can't tell that story. And I'll say, yeah, I can. That's why women are going to love the book,
No, I think that the sincerity that you project is so authentic. And when you combine that with the research that you've done, it's no surprise to anyone who's watched you on the air why you have such credibility and why you are so admired. And I want to ask you about another show. From 1996 to 2001, you hosted a documentary series called Behind Closed Doors. Oh. It took us to places we would not normally have access to. You went everywhere from the Pentagon to the jails, to the Miss America pageant, to the US Mint, even to the Betty Ford Center. I have to say, there's never been another show quite like it. I'm really sorry that it ended after 5 years. Were you sorry to see it end?
Really sorry. When ABC, they had to find some way to make good on the fact that David Hartman made like 10 times the amount that I made for sitting in the same seat doing the same job.
Wow.
So they decided they would give me, and that they couldn't call me an equal. So what they did is they gave me 3 specials a year, and they paid me for those specials. So they didn't have to deal with
the ego.
The ego, yes. And they said, but we don't want you to do a sit-down interview show. We've already got Connie Chung, and we've got Diane Sawyer, we've got Barbara Walters, we've got all these different people they want to sit down and interview celebrities. I said, I have zero desire to do that. But there used to be this guy named George Plimpton. Do you remember him?
Yeah, I do remember him.
Plimpton used to dress up as a Dallas cheerleader and go out and be a Dallas cheerleader, or as a football player and go out. I want to do what he did. I don't want to point a camera at the SEAL team. I want to go on a mission with them. And I want the people at home to find out, what is it like to be a SEAL? What is it like for somebody to be on the hostage rescue team? What is it like? I said, I want to actually go in and do these. Now, mind you, it cost a lot more money to do that, because for a lot of these things I went in to do, I flew in a U-2, we're not supposed to call it a spy plane, but a U-2 at 85,000 feet. I'm only supposed to admit to 65,000, but
I won't tell anyone.
Because the rest of the world, we don't tell them how high we actually go. And I had to go through 3 days of training for that. So to do Betty Ford Clinic, I put the ask out and no journalist had ever been allowed in. And we got word back that Betty Ford said, I trust her. And she's interviewed my husband. My husband tells me I should trust her. And so I will let her do this story, but she has to come here and be here for a week as a patient, live in a room with another patient, to do her duty of sweeping floors or whatever it is. And after a week, they allowed me, and my producer, I had a producer that went, she had to stay in another building. So we weren't, and at night she could come in and have 30 minutes with me to camera. Mind you, really no makeup or anything. They don't let you keep anything. Just give my thoughts and things. And then at the end of it, then we were allowed to bring in the crew and do the story. Well, there aren't a lot of journalists that would put that time in.
No.
They'd say, okay, I'll come for 5 days before you ever let me bring my cameras in. And almost everything I did, whether it was jumping with the Golden Knights from 13,000 feet, or whether it was landing on an aircraft carrier in an F-18, or whether it was deploying with the Navy SEALs, or whether it was whatever as my husband calls them, my stupid human tricks, but these amazing things that I got to do to actually live the life of someone else that was amazing. To go around the track at 230 miles an hour, covering Jeff Gordon. I mean, nobody gets to do these things. And I got to do these things. It was my ticket to adventure. And I started doing them. And pretty soon, it wasn't me asking to get in places. It was the Navy calling, saying, we're going to do an op, we're going to do a training mission, and we'll let Joan be on a nuclear sub. She has to fly to Puerto Rico, get on the sub there, and we're going to go out and we're going to deploy under the moonlight in little rubber boats down the side of the sub, and we're going to take the island of Viejas with live gunfire and explosives.
It's amazing. It's just amazing.
To which, of course, what do I say? I'm in. Remember, motto out of my playbook, whenever anyone asks if you can do something, just say yes.
I love it. And I want to mention that in 2001, you won the Distinguished Civilian Service Award from the U.S. Army for the episode of Behind Closed Doors dealing with the Army Golden Knights, 82nd Airborne Special Forces. That was one of my favorite episodes of your show. I just want you to know. Well,
what they basically said is you're the best recruiter we've ever had. And that's not even your purpose. But what you do, instead of just, having our ads that say, join us, you actually show what the life is like of a serviceman, I did Behind Closed Doors of the Secret Service, of the CIA, the
Mint.
Now that's one, by the way. I went to the Pentagon so many times trying to get into Fort Knox, and they always said no. I remember my producer said, you don't actually have any gold in there, do you? That's why you're not letting us in. You don't want us to know that there's no gold in there. But he would call me up. He would call me up and he'd say, put on a little navy blue suit, the one with the really short skirt, and wear some high heels. We're going to the Pentagon. And I need you to cajole some general with a lot of stars on his shoulders to let us in to whatever it is we were trying to get into. And we got in everywhere.
I know. I loved it. I hated to see it end.
No.
But then, you've done so much else. In 2007, you hosted an Emmy Award-winning program entitled America's Invisible Children.
Oh.
It shone a light on the 1.3 million homeless children in America struggling to get an education. That was such an eye-opener. And I always wanted to ask you, what brought that issue to your attention?
So I'm going to tell you, my agent, sometimes I found out that people would say to me, we tried so hard to get you to do something. And I'd say, I didn't even know you were trying. So I told my agent, you have to always tell me when someone's trying to book me, even if it doesn't pay, even if you think, you always have to tell me who's trying to book me for something. So he sends me this email that says, this offer has come in from this company. They're doing this special about blah, blah, blah. And they'd like you to host, but, only pays a couple $1,000s. You're not going to want to do it. So I go on and I Google and I start researching what this subject is about. And I go to their website and I called my agent and I said, you might not think that I should do this. I really think I should do this. This is an important subject.
Oh, yeah.
I don't care that they're not going to pay me a lot of money. And you know what? I did that and I got the Emmy for it.
Yes, you did. And boy, did it open up people's eyes. You should be so proud of the many, many issues that you've exposed the public to over the years.
It's this opportunity. This is, oh, what a wonderful life. The wonderful life has been the just enormous amount of opportunities I've been given.
I know. And then in 2010, you hosted Taking Care with Joan Lunden, a 4-part series examining the growing concerns over caregiving of our aging parents. You won a Gracie Allen Award for that series. And that's a subject that's really close to your heart, isn't it?
I took care of my mom and she had dementia. My brother had really bad type 2 diabetes and died when he was like 55. So my mom was left alone and I had to go down that caregiving path. And, it usually happens with that horrible telephone call. You don't have time to prepare. And I made a lot of mistakes. So I kind of came away from it saying, people need to be better prepared for this. Like I need to get the word out. So I started doing interviews about it. And little by little, I became this advocate for seniors. And I'm incredibly involved in that space today. This last year, I went to Congress to testify before the House Ways and Means Committee about the Family and Medical Leave Act. Because while in 1961, they passed legislation that, protected a woman when she left to have a baby, that she wouldn't lose her job, or that when someone needed to go and take care of an older parent. But it didn't protect everybody. Like a sibling couldn't do it. Anybody that has somebody in their life that they love, that they have to care for, they should all come under this and they should be compensated. The caregivers of this country are what they do is like worth billions of dollars. We want people to do this. We need to protect them. We shouldn't have women coming back after 10 days from having a baby because she has to go back because she has to have that paycheck. No. And, it just doesn't make any financial sense. But ironically, and by the way, Republicans and Democrats both agree on this, that it should be. They just disagree on how it should get paid for. And in this last passage of the big infrastructure bill, I think that Family and Medical Paid Leave Act is going to go through with it.
So you see, you didn't need to run for office because you are achieving real change. Now, in 2014, Joan, your whole life was turned upside down when you were diagnosed with triple-negative breast cancer. You wrote an amazingly powerful book about your journey entitled Had I Known, a Memoir of Survival. I actually read it twice. It's a must-read for anyone battling cancer or who has a loved one fighting cancer. Joan, it's incredible how many people you've inspired and empowered, not only by the courage and the tenacity that you showed in your personal life, but by demonstrating that you really can take control of your own health.
My dad was a cancer surgeon. Always thought I'd be a doctor just like him. Went to work in a hospital that he had helped to found. And he was also a passionate private pilot and was killed in our private plane when he was only 51. I was 13. And I always felt that I should carry on his legacy. But working in that hospital taught me that stitches and needles and scalpels were not going to be part of my future. And when I got that diagnosis, within 24 hours, I came to the realization that I had just been handed the most amazing opportunity to carry on my dad's legacy, to learn as much as I could about breast cancer, take my camera into my iPhone in and show people what it looked like. I had so many people say to me, thank you for doing all those videos. You took the scary out of it for me. And I was so scared to do that People magazine cover without a wig. And they came to my house that day, and I remember the editor-in-chief said, I'll shoot it with the wig, with the scarf, and then no, bald. And you can decide, you can look at the pictures. And as we were looking at the pictures, because these days you can see them immediately, and she looked at me and said, you realize that if we put that picture on the cover, how many lives you're going to affect?
Yep.
And, I had someone not too long ago say to me, I just got diagnosed with cancer. And the first thing that came into my mind was your People magazine cover. Not so much the cover or even really you, it was the smile on your face. And it made me say, if she is telling me that I can do this, that I can fight this. And I got to tell you, any reservations I ever had, they went right out the window.
I think your father would be so proud of you. I know he approves of your approach to battling cancer. I just know it.
When I go out and I speak, and which I did so much, from 7 years ago until the pandemic hit, so many luncheons, breast cancer luncheons. And I just always felt that he was kind of there.
Yep.
Saying, all right, I passed the baton and you got it. Now you run it into the end zone,
And the great thing is you didn't have to do it by going to medical school. You did it by being you and living your life. And another thing that got me, you wrote that dealing with cancer also changed your definition of beauty. You said that being attractive isn't about your outward appearance. It's about the strength and the character that you bring to everything you do. I have to say to you, Joan, you were a role modeling that principle long before you got cancer.
I think that when I was 20 or 30, I would have, looked at that strong woman as like this perfect, maybe Jane Fonda or something. And now I look at women who are resilient and who honor their bodies and who have compassion for others and who go out there and try to be their best self and make their mark on the world. My whole idea of that strong woman is so different now.
And the thing that gets me too, after leaving Good Morning America, you wrote a book called A Bend in the Road is Not the End of the Road, 10 Positive Principles for Dealing with Change. What I found fascinating is that when you wrote that book in 1998, you could not have known what was lying ahead in 2014. But the seeds for how you handled your battle with cancer were all planted in that book in 1998.
And when I was going through that huge change, leaving Good Morning America, I felt like I was the only person going through change because it was just so visible, like everybody knew about it. But as I started researching it, which is what I do for every book, I started realizing that it's probably the thing that people have the most trouble with. Everyone, not just me, everyone's fearful of change. It's why they stay in jobs and relationships and things, because they're afraid of what might come next. And so, it turned out to be a book that resonated with a lot of people. And it kind of taught me, this isn't about you, this is about human nature. And we all need to understand it so we can better navigate life's challenges.
And your latest book is entitled, Why Did I Come Into This Room? A Candid Conversation About Aging. I think it's a hilarious conversation about everything from wrinkles to hot flashes to ageism. And of course, the importance of having the right mindset to make the most out of our senior years. Now, as far as I'm concerned, you're still relatively young. What made you decide to address the topic of getting older?
But I'm aging. I'm aging like everybody else. And I think we all worry about it. And women, because of the plummeting estrogen, we experience the aging process in just a bigger, wilder way. And I thought, if we do it alone, then we all of a sudden feel like, ooh, is something wrong with me? Like, am I not as appealing anymore? Am I not as sexy? And it's a terrible path to go down. It takes you down to, am I relevant? And I said, and meanwhile, every single other woman is going through exactly the same thing. This has got to be put out there. This has got to be talked about. And I knew going into it, if I was going to be talking about leaky bladders and hot flashes, I better do it with a sense of humor. And that was hard for me to give myself permission to just balls out, say it like I thought about it. And I think that's why it's been, it went to number one, like within 12 hours on the New York Times list. And it's because people They can laugh, but they can identify. And everyone that comes to me says, you wrote this book just for me. Whether they're 40, 60, or 80, they think I was talking to them. So because I just put it all out there.
Yeah, you do.
If you haven't read it yet, you need to get it just for the Spank story.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. But I have to tell you, even as a man, I loved it because men have issues with aging too. Yes. And well, one thing I thought was important, you did a special series on TV a while back about the value of friendships and companionship. Yeah. Well, that's even more important as we get older, isn't it?
And I did that for the Today Show. I still do stories for them. They say there are 3 things that will predict how successfully we age. Number 1, staying engaged in life. Number 2, social connections. Not just, your daughter who comes over to help you. Friends that you wake up in the morning and you want to call and talk to. And the last thing is having a sense of purpose. And that's not like starting a philanthropic. It's having something in your life to get I don't care, it can be a garden in your backyard that you never thought you would do it. But man, now you want to get up, put your clothes on and get out there and weed it and get all those tomatoes so you can call your friends and give them a stash of your tomatoes. It's just something that gives your life meaning. And those are the 3 really important things. But friendship, if you don't have a big circle of friends, join a book club, join something so that you have friends to talk to.
Do you believe that we're only as old as we feel?
Yeah, everybody, they say you have a number in your head. I'm 45. How old are you?
I think I'm about 45. I'm really 65, but I feel like I'm 45.
And I'm really 70.
Yeah, but you...
I can't believe it. I mean, when I was 20, I thought 70 was going to be silver hair, like, I don't know, sitting on the porch with a rocker or something.
No. 70 is the new 40, especially if you're Joan Lunden.
100%.
One thing I was really surprised to learn from your book is that isolation is as dangerous to your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That was shocking to me.
Yeah. And no, it's something that is hard to understand until somebody gives it to you in those terms. And that's why it's really important that if somebody stays in their home as they age, like in my hometown here, there's a wonderful organization that has volunteers. They would go around and they'd pick up the older people, the aging people, and bring them to all kinds of events in the town. And, there was a fee, I don't know, $75 a year or something, but the point is it kept them engaged with people. Your brain needs to be engaged talking to other people. Now, I'll tell you, they say you need to be talking to other people. And if you can make it young people, that's even better. So do you know what I'm about to do?
What?
I have joined the faculty of Lehigh University in Pennsylvania, and I'm going to be a visiting professor. My first class is August 23rd. They built a big new college of health, my wheelhouse, and I'm going to be teaching population health and the media. And I have 50 students in my class, and there was so much interest from alumni and faculty that we're now live streaming the class every Monday afternoon. And I'm like doing a right turn into kind of a new career, and it's kind of scary, but it's also super exciting. And I'm going to have, Harvey, I'm going to have an audience of like 18 to 19, 20-year-olds. That's a tough audience. But the reason why it's different, I'm not just lecturing. Every single class, I'm going to be interviewing someone in the field of public health, population health, or the media. CDC directors, and they'll be able to, William Yeats, the poet, once said, education is not just the filling of a bucket, it's the lighting of a fire. Right. And I said, you guys are filling a lot of buckets here at Lehigh. I want to light the fire. I want these students to see people from the industry and hear their passion and hear how they're making their mark on the world and keeping a population safe and healthy. So that's my new endeavor.
I love it. I think you're a natural. You've been educating the world your whole life. This is a perfect fit. And I can't wait to see where you go from there. I bet you're going to end up being dean of the university within like a year. Joan, you've seen enormous changes in the broadcasting industry since you first started as a news anchor on KCRA TV in 1973. There are hundreds of channels and streaming services, and the internet bombards us with nonstop news and information. What's the litmus test that you use to determine what's credible on television these days?
I think that the three network, ABC, NBC, CBS Evening News, to me, they are credible. I mean, I know how they work. I know how they research. I know what their goal is. And their goal is not to make you think a certain way politically. Their goal is to let you know what happened that day. You know, I remember when CNN first came on and all of us were like scratched our heads and said, they can cover news 24 hours a day, really? And they did. And in the beginning, you would see what was going on in China, and then you'd see what was going on in Pakistan, and then you'd see what was going on. And it was awesome. They had these reporters all over the world. I think it's kind of when Fox News went on and became a
pundit show,
unapologetic political party show. I think CNN kind of got the idea that somebody had to be a counterbalance to them. Right. And I kind of feel that they become a bit of a counterbalance. And I don't want to hear anti-Trump all day. I don't care if you love him or hate him. It's enough already. I want to know what's going on all around the world. I want that CNN back that shows me what happened in Israel or Brazil or anywhere in the world. I mean, I end up watching BBC sometimes just so I can know what's going on around the world.
No, I get it. Joan, in many ways, you're the quintessential working mother. You raised 7 children, including 2 sets of twins. You cared for an aging parent while having an incredibly busy, high-profile career. You even won 2 Mother of the Year awards from the National Institute of Infant Services and the National Mother's Day Committee. What's the secret to multitasking so efficiently at such a highly accomplished level?
And October 22nd, I'm getting the Mother of the Year award from the American Cancer Society this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm a multitasker. I'm an incredibly organized person. Everything's on my calendar. When I know I have interviews, I mean, I did 4 podcast interviews today, and I set my alarm on my phone, for 15 minutes before. However, last night, I went over what I was going to be doing today, and I got my head on straight. In that calendar note, I wrote down, like, I should be thinking about this and this. Do I need to look anything up? I just did a USA Today interview on breast cancer. Like, I made sure I was prepared for them. But I also, you have to figure out what your priorities are. And sometimes you have to start saying no to a few things. And I'm so
glad you didn't say no to me.
Oh, no. I didn't say no to you. But you got to have your priorities. Your children are important. Don't let them have the phones at the table. Don't have your phone at the table. Have that time as just talk time as a family. Listen to them. I have twins that are 16 and twins that are 18. So I got them all in high school right now. I'm married to a fantastic guy, a wonderful guy who owns and runs summer camps for children. So it's kind of nice having a camp director in the house. I'm not sure I'd want to do this if I didn't have that camp director in the house.
Well, from 1983 to 1989, you hosted a TV show about parenthood called Mother's Day, which showcased a myriad of issues impacting on family life and especially the best interests of children. I love that show. I've always had the feeling that regardless of all your professional achievements, your focus on being a mother was front and center in your life.
Well, raising well-rounded, well-mannered, honest, compassionate people, like, there is no bigger job than that. You don't want to screw that one up. And gosh, I look at my 3 older girls, Harvey, who are all married. They're great mommies. And, we've talked about it, that I wasn't always there in the pickup line at school. I couldn't be. And they say, yeah, but you were at every single important event ever in our lives. Because I insisted. I used to say to ABC, do you understand why people relate to me? It's because I have these 3 little kids. And they are actually 3 real little kids. And I have to be at their parent-teacher conferences. I have to be at their ballet recitals. I have to be at these things. But when I'm not there, I'll give you 150%. And they worked with me. And I got to give them some kudos for doing that in the very early days before corporations worked with women in order for them to feel like they could do both. And you know what? We all wonder every now and then whether we should be spending a little bit more time over here or over here. It's a very complicated tightrope to walk for women.
Well, it's not an exact science, and every child has different needs. But I have to say, you open a lot of doors by insisting on some workplace accommodation. You open doors for a lot of other women, and you've won dozens of awards, including the WWE Warrior Award, the National Women's Political Caucus Award, the Spirit of Achievement Award from the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. And of course, in 2017, you won the Distinguished Service Award from the National Association of Broadcasters. What's left for Joan Lunden to conquer?
Oh my gosh, there's always a lot. Look, I'm starting right now being a professor. I mean, I just got through with my syllabus and I did my new email. And how do you want it to end? Professor Lunden.
Wow.
By the way, that's not going to impress my kids, my teenagers, but.
Yeah, but there's a lot more about you that impresses them. That's a lot deeper than a title. Believe me. I want to know what advice you would give to young people aspiring to pursue a career in journalism and broadcasting.
It's not so much important to know how a camera runs. If you want to be in front of the camera, or even a director, not a director, but a producer, take civics, take history, take public speaking so that you learn how to get up and extemporaneously talk and make your point. But know what's going on in the world. Take classes on sociology and world cultures and political science. Be as well versed about the world, because that's really what you have to have in your brain. That's kind of like the foundation that you build everything else on. Be curious. More important than anything. If you have an interview, you don't go into an interview to just ask questions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have to listen. Maybe there's another important question to ask that wasn't even on this list. And, I think that's a mistake a lot of people make. But being curious, and it's a lot of hard work. This is not a profession to go into if you are not interested in really, really working hard. Whether you're a reporter out in the field, whether you're in a studio, it might look like a very glamorous career to you when you sit in your living room and watch it, but it is extremely time consuming and task oriented and requires an absolute passion to be curious about other people and to bring that to the public and to be the interpreter, because the media has to be the messenger and the interpreter of science. I mean, and right now we have this huge break in public trust of the media and science. So it's more important than ever that we really acknowledge. That's what my class is about at Lehigh. It's about population health and the media, that important intersection. We've done great things together. Just think seatbelt safety, think smoking, think drinking and driving, think crib safety, like all the things. But the government and health agencies can mandate all they want. But if it isn't interpreted by the media to the people, then you can't affect lifestyle changes on any kind of an enormous population level.
So I'm going to add a few things that you're probably too modest to add. My impression of you as a lifelong fan of yours is that there was also incredible professionalism. This is what you're known for. You were on time. You were well prepared. You treated everybody from the crew to your coworkers to your guests with respect. You had their back. You spoke about the guests who were too nervous to really articulate the way they wanted to. You made everybody look good. You never made one show about you. It was always about the topic you were covering or the people you were interviewing. And I just have to tell you, as a fledgling talk show host, I think you created the blueprint for everybody else. And I just want to thank you.
Well, thanks. And that's the way it's supposed to be, the way you just described it. And I thank you for inviting me.
Oh, Joan, having you on our show has been a dream come true. You exemplify the definition of excellence in everything you do. Your passion about sharing information to educate all of us is so inspirational. I'm immensely grateful to you for taking the time to come on our show. Thank you.
Well, I'm very flattered.
And I can't get over that you've already done 4 podcasts before you came on my show today. Yes. That's amazing. Your energy level is astounding for a 45-year-old.
That's being a professional. You got to bring it. Don't phone it in.
Thank you so much, Joan, for taking the time to be on the show. I can't thank you enough.
Bye, everybody. Bye,
our guest has been the incomparable journalist, television host, author, and health advocate, Joan Lunden. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you to our producer, Steve Silver. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
Remember to subscribe to the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. And be sure to check out more great interviews with Harvey Brownstone on harveybrownstoneinterviews.com.